any medical or clinical input. So I'll hand over to Marion and Leigh Belcher, who are two of the patient representatives who have been involved since the very beginning.
Thanks, Pete. Pete, just a quick word at the beginning. This is Fiona's slide, and we're delighted that Fiona's on the call today. So whilst I haven't had a chance to let Leigh know, Fiona's really happy to use the same format. So if you want to start, Leigh, with Fiona, because it's her slide, and I'll do my usual butting in if I want to say something. Is that all right? This is showing the flexibility of patients in their work.
Sounds perfect. Do you want me to hand to you, Fiona? Just on mute. Just on mute, Fiona. So if we can go to the next slide, this is really the reason that the patients wanted to talk today is because we have been integral to this project, but actually this is to really try to bring home to you the importance of a cancer care review outside of it just being a QOF indicator, a tick box exercise. Because when you have a cancer diagnosis, it's huge, not just for you as an individual, but for your entire family as well. And what Fiona has been mentioned here is Fiona, when she got her diagnosis, actually created this mind map to just start to chart some of the complexity and all of the considerations that come to a patient's mind, not just them, their carers, their family members. And actually, cancer diagnosis, it's huge. It's all encompassing. Fiona, did you want to speak a bit more about your mind map?
Okay, yes, thanks. Actually, the funny thing is, so sorry to contradict you right from the off, but in actual fact, I was diagnosed in 2001, 21 years ago, pretty much about now. And I didn't make this until 2012, when I was first getting involved as a patient rep in some service improvement. And the London and South East Macmillan doctors asked me if I'd come and talk to them about the less expected consequences of cancer. So this is, bear in mind, this is 11 years in. And I thought, well, you know, I can't really think of much. And as you can see, when I started to write down the various aspects of my life that had been affected by cancer, I kind of couldn't stop writing. In fact, I only really stopped writing because the page was full. So I think the really obvious ones, and the ones that healthcare professionals tend to raise, are so I don't know if you can see, but the little boxes in capitals are the main sections. So if you look from aftermath of Whipples, you know, there are some other things hanging off that, all under that section. Under psychology, there's some things hanging off the psychology and so on. And I think, you know, we tend to assume there'll be an aftermath after major surgery or after chemotherapy or after radiotherapy. There's all that business of trying to rebuild your life with the long-term effects of treatment and so on. So that was kind of the obvious one. And for me in particular at this time, I just had a Whipples, which is a really major surgery, and was still living with and trying to adapt to the consequences of that. And then I just started to think about all these other aspects, and I was pretty devastated when I realized how much of my life was being affected by this. So I'm not intending to go through this. This will be shared afterwards, and people are very, very welcome to keep this and use it. But I think the sheer range of the effects is just stunning, really, from the effects, the ripple effects on family and friends and colleagues, which it's easy to overlook when you're in the middle of this maelstrom and you're just busy surviving, really, to the whole sort of psychology thing about, on the one hand, feeling reasonably confident. You think you start to feel confident, and a little sort of ting creates that. If you're old enough to remember Tom and Jerry, they were always hitting each other with frying pans, and then their whole bodies would fill with splintered cracks and then collapse. And it felt like that a lot of the time, that the tiniest thing would undo all that confidence and put a real dint or shatter this carapace of confidence that you've been building. So that kind of thing. Financial aspects just huge. You know, we are still having to heat the house to a ridiculous extent because I really, really feel the cold very badly. And the knock-on financial effects of living with a disability as well are just constant, absolutely constant. Domestically, you know, where you live, how you live. it's just sort of endless, really, when you start to detail it. It should be said as well that I did find a couple of silver linings, and that might be worth mentioning. So I retired, and I've enjoyed being retired, in spite of having loved my job. And I took up wheelchair basketball as a result of the disability I acquired after my surgery. And that's been a brilliant, brilliant part of my life, and it still is. And I was joint top scorer in a match on Saturday, so even better. But I think this is useful because I think it will enable you to open up conversations with patients. I hope it will, and to prompt if necessary, because I think patients come in not wanting to be a burden and a bit loath to go through all the stuff that's affecting them. But actually, for nearly everybody you're talking to, all these things will apply.
I think that's really important, Fiona. Leigh, if I could just dip in there, is that a VCCR would give us patients and carers the opportunity to discuss these things, which, as you say, you're often loath to raise because the doctors are really busy and there isn't the time and it seems trivial. But a VCCR would absolutely give us opportunity, and other people in that group would be able to say, oh, I feel like that too. And I think there's a huge benefit in sharing these experiences, which sit slightly outside the mainstream, and make other people who are also witnessing them think, oh, I'm not crazy after all. This is quite normal. Everybody feels parts of this too. Thanks, Leigh. Thanks, Fiona.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. And when I look at this mind map, and I'm sure that actually everybody who's had personal experiences of cancer, either as a patient or a carer, could continue to add to this mind map. Really, there's no limit to its potential. But when I can't imagine that any caregiver, any professional could come up with a tick box exercise that could accurately reflect the kind of content that is in that map. And actually what it really shows you is the complexity and the stresses and the strains that are on patients and carers, and the need that they have to actually just discuss these things, even just to offload them, because sometimes just saying it is enough. But in that process, what strikes me is the potential for professional staff to really understand the complexities of a cancer diagnosis and how they can be instrumental in effectively supporting patients going forwards in not just one or two, but actually a number of areas, and just allowing people to come together to just even discuss this as a counselling support in itself. Is it something that you feel that you would benefit from, Marion and Fiona?
It would have been huge when I was in the midst of caring for somebody with cancer. There's many things in here that are really difficult to talk about because there is an overwhelming, and quite right, expectation that we will feel very grateful, as we are, for all the treatment that's been received and the fact that the patient is still alive. But sometimes, and I want to say this to people genuinely, it's not enough. You need to live well, and everything that Fiona's put on there, it shows the impact that this diagnosis has. And there's one little bit missing because for me, because in amongst all this, there's the ordinary commonality of your relationship as well, which I think it can often be overlooked. And I've said before, you know, we don't all come into our cancer pathway perfect. So we don't all have a loving relationship. And there's sometimes there needs to be a space where you can say, actually, this is just dreadful. I didn't like him much in the first place, and now look what's happened. And where can you say that? It's really, really hard. People who are victim survivors of domestic abuse, in this setting, it's almost impossible to say, actually, I want to leave him. And I have an idea that this just might be possible in a contained, properly facilitated, well-supported group. It just might be possible to raise the topic that actually this hasn't made things any easier for me at all. And we need that.
I think it's worth saying as well that, you know, sometimes people say things like, well, it puts everything into perspective, doesn't it? You know, you realise what's important, you realise who your friends are, that kind of thing. But actually, although to some extent, you know, you do realise who your friends are and you really treasure the people who support you, of course, it doesn't give you some sort of Zen-like calm and perspective on the world. You know, the little things still drive you mad. You know, the bathroom sink being dirty, or I don't know, you know, the million things in life that drive you mad, whether it's out in the street or in your home. You know, those things still affect you. As you know, as Marion said, they can be quite small things. They might be huge things, but you don't suddenly think, oh well, the important thing is I'm alive and everything else is fine, because it's not necessarily enough. And I think particularly, and again Marion's kind of alluding to this as well, this business about emotional energy, the pressure to be fine, yeah, doing nicely, thanks, yeah, you know, we have tough days but we're getting through all that. The expectation of delivering a sort of positive outlook when you're feeling crap, the expectation that you're fine, the expectation that you're trying to deliver good news is just such a lot to carry, really. It's really, really exhausting. So I think if people can use this to help pick apart some of those themes, you know, it's got to be useful. It would also be useful in a one-to-one setting as well, of course, as well as in a group setting. And I would have liked to have been able to discuss some of these issues if I'd ever had a cancer care review, but I need to say publicly here that I never have in 21 years. And I know the team who've been involved in this have been really shocked by this, but I don't know how widespread it is, but I think it's worth raising in this wider forum. Thanks.
Absolutely agree. I've never had a cancer care review, and I had cancer treatment whilst my husband was actually dying from cancer. And that's another area that I'd add to this mind map, actually dealing with end of life, because the requirements of somebody who are receiving end of life care are entirely unique, and the CCRs to me offer the potential to really tap into those very specific circumstances for the person who is dying, but actually to support those around them, because that's a huge transformation in life. And in that respect, cancer will never stop impacting my life. So really what we wanted to establish today was there is a real significant importance to what you are doing in participating in this training and carrying out these cancer care reviews. It will have a huge impact for patients, and anything that can make life easier when you're going through the most traumatic of circumstances has got to be a positive thing. So thank you very much from the patients today, and I'm going to pass on, I believe, to Liz.
Yeah, thank you, Fiona Leigh and Marion. I think we could almost stop the meeting there, because I think you've made the case for virtual cancer care reviews, and we don't need to go any further. When we did this webinar last week, your slide, Fiona, was the one that provoked most debate, and I think is certainly the most powerful. And again, we were, I think, Liz and I, as the other GP who's been involved in this project, were absolutely horrified when we first started this, and neither of you had actually knowingly received a cancer care review, and that sort of bore out some of our earlier work. So I'm going to introduce now Liz Towers, who's a GP in Mid-Essex, and she's actually going to talk about it from the existing QOF and medical perspective, if you like, and what we hope this project will actually add to standard cancer care review.